What is up, guys? Pie Muffin here, and we are back with another Tales of Arise video. It's mostly Tales of Arise, but basically we have an interview with producer Tomizawa. Um, so this happened at TalesFest, but a lot of this information we kind of know, but I want to keep you guys updated on kind of more of the specifics about what kind of got talked about during this interview, because it does shed some light on what they're kind of do with the future of the franchise. And huge shout out to Abyssal Chronicles for putting this together for us. I will leave a link to their Twitter and to this article down below in the description. But yeah, let's go ahead and just dive right into this. So I'm going to read off all the questions, and then we'll kind of just... I don't think I'm going to read everything because this is a very, very long article, and I don't want to keep you all here for like half an hour, but watch this video end up being half an hour anyway. But we're just going to kind of go over all the kind of main important stuff. So the first kind of section was a worldwide simultaneous marketing strategy, which is obviously, we know that's what they're going for, mainly because it seems like it started back, and this is kind of talked about in the article, with last year's reveal at Anime Expo of Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition, and they basically wanted to they're starting to go into this process of reaching a worldwide audience instead of just doing Japan first and then worldwide, because they're trying to evolve Tales into a, what's the word for it, just more of a well-known series, because obviously it's very niche kind of here in the West. You know, I'd say you've got probably a good, maybe a couple 100,000 people, overall, who stay actively invested in all the news that comes out. And then you've got everyone else who, maybe kind of plays the games, and they're like, oh, this is coming out, that's cool, I'll probably pick it up, maybe play it once. But for the most part, it's not like a huge deal out here like it is with Final Fantasy. But yeah, so let's go ahead and hop into this. Long-awaited new mothership game Tales of Arise has finally been announced. I'm sure the fan reaction has been enormous, but please tell us how you felt on seeing it. And they're basically talking about what I just said, how they're trying to reach a worldwide audience. So they brought Tales of Arise to a foreign event, aka E3. I think I said Anime Expo earlier. I didn't mean Anime Expo. I meant E3. If I said Anime Expo, I apologize. But anyways, they announced the game at E3. Obviously, that's not... And he goes on to say here, I didn't really see the Japanese reaction, because for the most part, you would assume that Japanese people don't watch the stuff that happens at stuff like E3, because it doesn't really apply, to them overall, because usually the Japanese games that get showed off at E3 have already been shown off in Japan. But they've begun sharing their news through Tales channel, which is their blog. They have an official blog now for, consistent updates, and I believe Crestoria is also... I don't know if it's the same blog or if there's two separate blogs, but I know Crestoria has a blog as well that they're going to be doing constant updates with. And of course, on his own Twitter account, fans can get news whenever we publish it. After the E3 announcement, we were seeing reactions on social media all night long. It seemed like we just looked up and it was 5 a.m. The jet lag never ended. And then, yeah, we'll go through this. So that was my main feeling through social media. We're seeing reactions from everywhere across Japan, Europe, and America all at once. As for the PV, it was about the new graphics. We wanted it to feel like Tales, but also like it was evolving. So in some ways, we were a bit relieved. So that's been the big thing here that a lot of fans have kind of had trouble kind of swallowing. I feel like most of the people in the West, who are kind of like more casual Tales goers, they'll play a game when it comes out, but they won't stay invested in all the Tales media that comes out that's not like a main title. They're kind of fine. They're like, oh, yeah, these are amazing graphics. This is crazy. This doesn't even, this is like Tales, but like... And people were trying to say like God Eater graphics and stuff like that, which is also part of... They mention this later in this interview. But yeah, I feel like a lot of casual Tales goers are kind of just like, oh, this game looks amazing. Look at these graphics. Look at all this, blah, 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 blah. But I feel like a lot of fans who were kind of started from the beginning and have really kind of had this sort of feeling for Tales were kind of thrown off just by how it looks, because it did feel very it's like Tales meets Monster Hunter in a way. That was my initial reaction, and I'll say my initial reaction was very negative at first, but I came around to having a more positive outlook on it. But yeah, let's go ahead and continue. The preview was to express that we're going to make sure to respect the traditions and evolution of the series staples. We've had all kinds of responses. Questions like, is the element I love still there? Game mechanics, ideas, and art. There's a lot we can't reveal, so I hope everyone keeps their eye on newsfeed. So they're basically saying, we can't tell you stuff right now because we're still working on the game, but as time goes on, we get closer to 2020, we'll keep revealing more information. Another question was, has anyone asked if making the announcement E3 means you'll be considering a foreign market more strongly? And I kind of talked about this already. The main thing is that they want to reach globally instead of just only in Japan. While they do still feel like, I mean, it even says here, there may be material targeted Japanese fans that will reach Japan first. So if there's like specific things that have to do with this game that only really apply to Japanese fans, like let's say, for example, the I don't really have a good example for something like this, but let's say a character from let's say Kyle from Tales of Destiny 2 was going to be the cameo character. That might be something that would reach Japan first, just because that game never came out over here. So it wouldn't really, having a reveal like that, which I don't, not that I can never remember them doing like cameo characters as like big reveals. It's usually just something when the game comes out, people see it. But I could see that being something, if they wanted to promote it, that Japan would get first, and then we wouldn't really get we would probably have a post about it, but the game never came out here, so most fans in the West are just going to be like, oh, I didn't get to play this game. And then they also talk about, how PS3 version of Vesperia wasn't sold over here when it originally came out, and they answer them by announcing Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition with a remaster of the PS3 game. And that was kind of, in a way, their test. So now, with Tales of Arise, they knew what they wanted to do with this, and that's kind of keep the same thing. And they even go ahead to talk about that they are aiming for a worldwide release for this game. And then down here, we think PV showed fans the series of our new approach, but we do know that they don't want things to change so suddenly, so we're working on a custom shader built for facial expressions so that the characters still look like Tales of characters, even though they're in Unreal Engine 4. What we want to communicate is a long process of evolution that will put long-term fans at ease. So the game is, the franchise is going to change over the next like 2, 3, 4 mainline titles. We'll continue to see a change to Tales that will eventually, if you were someone who only played Symphonia and you're going to play the game 4 games ahead of Arise, they're probably not going to seem like the same game or the same franchise like at all, which is kind of good and bad. But I can't really speak on that until I see how my full experience with Arise is, because if it's good, then I can be like, okay, this was some change that actually worked, and I'm okay with this. Do Japanese and foreign fans want the same thing? As far as characters are concerned, they're the same. I've been to some foreign events, and they show me that regardless of race or language, people are people. I saw people cosplaying Tales of characters at Anime Expo, and their love for the characters was the same. The light in their eyes was the same, and the sphere is the same. That said, they want something a bit different in gameplay. So, I feel like that's kind of I can understand why he says that, because you look in the West, and games like Dragon Quest, Tales, Star Ocean, those are all titles that aren't as popular over here because, and I hate to kind of group the like America in kind of like a bucket right here, but a lot of kind of gaming that happens is like first person shooters. You've got like your Fortnite, your stuff like that. Um, that's what's really popular over here. So, people want like hardcore action and stuff like that. But it seems like what they're saying with gameplay is they're trying to make it more, I guess, competitive in a way. I don't really know how, because there's not really too much that is really expounded upon here. Um, so it seems like what they're trying to say is that, the old Tales style of gameplay, like Symphonia Vesperia, Zillia, all kind of have the same sort of style. And it seems like fans want this kind of like, not really free roam because it's not free roam and they do talk about this, but it's a big world. That's for sure. They even go on to say that, you know, they made it so the landscapes look like they're kind of endless, even though you can't really explore them all. They're still going to be so they're going to be like how Zestiria and Berseria were, where it's very area based. I mean, Zillia was like that too. Graces was like that. You walk into an area, it's a new map. Um, so they are going to go for something like that. And as for the actual battle gameplay, obviously they we'll actually save that for when we get down to it, because they do talk about gameplay a bit more in what was shown in the trailer. So you announced the voice actors for the main characters of Tales Festival 2019 because you thought that Japan or Japanese fans were waiting for that specifically. And see, that's another thing I'm talking about. This is something that they didn't reveal at E3, because this isn't something that, and obviously they could have revealed the English voices, but I feel like, and people can agree or disagree, whatever you want to do. The voices that play a character matter a lot more to Japanese fans than they do to English fans. You can get you can get someone to come back. Um, you could get, I'm just gonna pick a character out of a random, let's say Guy's English voice actor from Tales of the Abyss was the main character for Arise. People are gonna be like, seeing the name isn't gonna matter to English fans. They're gonna be like, oh, let's see what this person's voice. Oh, cool, he played another Tales character. But in Japan, like, they'll see the name and they know who this person is. So it's a much bigger deal. That's one of those Japan specific announcements that obviously like applied to earlier. Um, the whole arena certainly screamed when the characters' names and voices were announced. I see that was as you planned. The main character Alphen is voiced by Takuya Sato, and the heroine Shion is voiced by Shino Shimoji. Can you tell us any considerations you had while casting? We had many candidates audition as usual. The entire team contributed to judgment, but in general, I don't think we're doing anything different than from choosing someone who can express what we want the character to express. We'll consider how they perform on the stage at TalesFest, and the players want us all to love our characters, including the cast, as just as before. So they're basically saying they just want someone who can convey the character. I don't want to say correctly, but in a way that fits the character. So I'm very happy about that. Obviously, we have a lot of Japanese voice actors that are very invested in the franchise, like Luke and Lloyd's Japanese voice actors are very invested with this franchise. So it is nice to see that they are taking the same kind of love when picking someone and continuing with that forward. Okay, and next, I know foreign sales are as much or maybe even more than domestic. Foreign treatment of some subjects, for example, LGBT, is a bit different from in Japan. Are you changing your own treatment of any subjects to account for worldwide sales? It is an era where we have to be mindful of things like cultural differences. Not only Tales, but any game has to be aware of and respond to audiences from anywhere in the world. Still, we won't change so many things so quickly. We'll lose what makes Tales beloved. So what they're basically saying is they're not going to pull a Zestiria the X, um, which completely destroyed in a lot of fans' opinions. You may disagree, you may like what it did, but in a lot of fans' opinions, I'd say majority, that kind of did what they're afraid of doing here if they change things too quickly, which is changing what makes Tales beloved. But yeah, so obviously it's a lot different than how things used to be. Obviously Symphonia and Rebirth have very heavy themes in there that probably wouldn't fly as well today. So obviously that's stuff they have to kind of take into account when they make these games, but they want to keep Tales staying Tales. A game to revitalize the brand, apart from the way you announced it. The most surprising thing about Tales of Arise was the reuse of the initial letter. We've already talked about this. They basically went with, they had other choices. They were originally, planning on going with the different letter, but they're talking about here is that, when they do all the letters in the alphabet, are they just going to stop making games? So they don't want to kind of have that kind of anxiety of being like, oh, we only have this many games left. So they basically scrapped the whole, unsung rule of we can't repeat a letter, especially when, side games, mobile games have already reused the letters. So and they said Arise because they wanted the name of the game to actually have to do with what the game is actually about. So I'm honestly fine with it. I know there are people who are upset about the reuse of a letter, but we're going to get past, 25, 26 games eventually, so you're going to run out of letters eventually. And they don't want to stop after just making 25 games. And then they talk about what is the official abbreviation. It is, so TOA is for Tales of the Abyss. TO Arise is for Tales of Arise. You can see it right here. So obviously, if you are talking about the game, preferably use that abbreviation, because otherwise you're just going to get tons of people correcting you anyway, so you may as well use the right one. And then he even says, like, are you actively asking fans to use TO Arise? And he says he is. Developing with tradition and evolution in mind. You feel very strongly about Tales of Arise. Is there anything you can tell us about concepts you've shared in development? It's not that we're making Tales into something completely different overnight. This is a marketing perspective, but the brand has been around for 25 years and will be around for many more. With the players and culture changing the whole time, the children of our original players may be enjoying this game now. That's why we think we need to update the way we communicate. And that's basically, they're basically saying that the game needs to evolve past what the games used to be, because the kids who are playing these games now, they have different, they grew up with different kinds of games. We're in a new generation where, enhanced graphics, like very unique gameplay is a thing. So they're basically trying to say that the gameplay back in early 2000s is probably not going to fly for a game that comes out today. Seems bold to change as much as you have. Was it your own decision? It was more the people that wanted it than I personally did. When you're creating something, there are times for one person to make a call and times to balance all perspectives. Sometimes you change one thing and then something else needs to be changed, so you have to consider multiple angles when you make a decision. Our game is made of many complex parts, and there were some things that simply could not be changed. So, like, for example, obviously you're still going to have your 6 to 7, or who knows how many of this game will have, party members. It's still going to be, 4 characters on the field. They're going to talk about this in a minute, but I'm just kind of throwing stuff out there that they're not going to change. We had to look at each component, how it will fit into and developed from Tales history. We had to look at what users wanted and what they would reject if something was changed, or if there was something we could change. The development team is working out all these things in detail. So it's obviously not a finished product because it's a 2020 game, and you can tell from a lot of this interview that it's probably not close to being done. So I'm not expecting an early 2020 release. I'm expecting maybe like summer, if we're lucky. But I would say the first couple months of 2020, I would not expect the game to come out. I would be very surprised. And then they ask about, this was already talked about before. We got this information. Basically about how Tales has new staff. It has old staff all the way from Fantasia all the way up to Vesperia. So you've got tons of people working to make sure that this series evolution works out the way that fans will like it to. You produced Tales of Vesperia Definitive Edition. Has that helped you here? My own first Tales I played was Vesperia. When I saw the fan reaction as a creator to series traditions like animated scenes, to see I received the game, I enjoyed it even after all this time. It gave me confidence in my ability to create, but I do know that it was a remaster and Tales of Arise is a completely new product. Obviously, just remastering Vesperia is totally different than creating a new game from scratch, is basically what he's saying. So I'm working with two opposing reels, trying to predict the fans' reactions. Evolution, but still recognizable. Tales of Berseria, they're basically talking about here how Berseria was made on a PS3 engine, but it still came out on PS4. Same thing with Vesperia. It only came out on PS4 in the West. It didn't come out on PS3 in the West, but in Japan it came out on PS3. But this game is going to be on PS4, Xbox One, and PC, running through Steam. I'm sure you thought a lot about how you could push the graphics, but what was that like? There was a gap between the PS3 and PS4 specs, which led us to use Unreal Engine 4. Previously, we used in-house engines. So it obviously has a different look to it, as everyone's already seen. So it was a decision between what we built up and what Unreal Engine 4 was capable of. What ultimately tipped the scales was Unreal Engine 4's advantages in producing atmosphere and rendering things like light. But out of the box, Unreal Engine 4's renders a realistic aesthetic you can find anywhere, so you won't get that in Tales feeling, and we won't stick out from the crowd. So like I said, we're using Unreal Engine 4, but implementing a custom shader. For instance, we scale down the background and add detail to the foreground, making the video look more natural. So what they're saying is that even though they're using Unreal Engine 4, which is, obviously used for a lot of realistic looking games, they are still kind of pulling it back so that it still does look like Tales, so it doesn't just look like every other game that's made in Unreal Engine 4. So when you see the characters, you get a sense of depth of field. What's in front of you is vivid, and the background fades away like a painting. It took a long time to reach that point. Obviously, this game has been in development since, probably early 2017. So they've had a lot of time to work on this. At first, we tried a hand-drawn style shader, but it made the characters look dumb. The staff said it looked low detail, and gamers would mistake it for low res, and that's not what we were going for. We tried to strike a balance between showing the characters and the environments. When we added motion in, we continued tuning Vesperia Remoto. The graphics developers and the visual design team worked very hard together and now have a unique style that they're proud of. Now here they go ahead to talk about how they're going with one character designer instead of multiple. It's because they kind of want to have, mainly for a consistent sense of the world. So everything in the world so it kind of feels like it fits together instead of, you got one person doing the backgrounds, you got one person doing the characters, you got one person doing the enemies. So they want to have some consistency when it comes to how the game looks as a whole. So having one person do that is a lot better than having multiple people do it. So you're saying the illustration you've already released could be updated until it's complete. Correct. Or if we've completed a 3D model, but once it's rendered in-game and we want something changed, we can do it. For instance, often when exploring, you'll be looking at a character's back. When we rendered Alphen's sword, it gleamed in the light, and we thought it was a better look. We can change how to lay it on his back to fit. So they're basically saying that there's still what we saw at E3 and what we saw design-wise may not be the final product, which is the case for most games in general. I'm curious, how was the reaction when Iwamoto is the sole character designer, basically saying that he felt, he felt a lot of pressure, but he's working hard at leadership every day. Maybe I'll say I'm glad he's here, but I feel he's definitely a good helper. Digging into Arise's revealed systems, they're basically talking about right here. The story summary talks about the two planets. So they asked if in this image, this preliminary image, if that was the planet in the background. Are the two planets shown in the sky in this image? As no, this image shows Rena as seen from Donna's surface. So this is Donna, the not so thriving planet, and Rena is the planet up there. In the story, planets are quite opposed. Is this reflected in the environmental design? The technological levels of the planets are literally worlds apart. Donna has a Middle Ages tech level with no magic. Um, yeah, Middle Ages tech level, so just swords and all that kind of stuff. While Rena is highly developed in both science and magic, you'll find that in the game, and they appear completely different. So science and magic. So that just kind of reminds me in Star Ocean 5, it was kind of like that. The people on the main planet knew nothing of technology or spaceships and stuff, but then you get these people who come to the planet, and it's such a weird kind of like coexistence. So it seems like they're going to go for a similar type of thing here. So obviously the planet where Alphen is from is just very basic. It's like if you compared Symphonia. If you compare Tetheala and Silverant. Silverant was the world that was just basic Middle Age stuff, and then Tetheala had full-on cities with some pretty high tech, but it seems like it's gonna be more fleshed out here. Like, it seems like Rena will be very technologically advanced, especially since they look down to the people of Donna so much. In the PV, there was a volcano area and a grassy area. Those both Donna. It's difficult to say much about what planet those two areas are on its stage. Strained laugh. What I can tell you is Donna has been enslaved to Rena for 300 years, and parts of its culture have been influenced in that time. So there may be architecture on Donna that comes from Rena, for instance. You can imagine for yourself where this art came from where. Basically, he doesn't want to tell us too much because it's not even in the final stages of development yet. It looks like you can go pretty far in the distance there. Some are wondering if that means the game is open world. What is the game structure like? He basically goes on to say it is not open world. So everyone just stick that in your mind. Not open world. This isn't Breath of the Wild. It'll still be area based like every other Tales game was. You explore each map and sometimes enter dungeons like a traditional RPG. We do want it to. Oh, okay. We do want it to feel like an open world, and I was talking about this before, where they have the environments are huge and built into the design. We did try to make large maps during development in the game. There are vistas that make you wonder whether you'll reach something you see in the distance. And the other thing in this game we've tried is to have differences in the environments. I don't know why I say communicate. There's no communicate here. Sometimes I read so much I see words meshing together. But basically they're saying no open world. It's gonna be traditional Tales with traditional in the sense as the last 4 or 5 titles, where you walk into an area, it's a huge area, but it's not open world. You can't like scale the mountain at the border of the map. And then I remember climbing to reach a treasure chest. It's not going to be that kind of one-trick design. There are also fields that look like an illustration. Not really sure what they're trying to say here. But it's not going to be that kind of one. So it seems like it's going to be more in-depth than just climbing up somewhere and grabbing a treasure chest. So you look up and feel how large the world is. That, and also there's a castle in the background. Can you get there? We think that's kind of discovery and wonder made possible. Fields are very important. Tales has always held that as important. But now we can make it richer, more immersive fields. We can give players a sense like never before. So I'm sure people will see this as something to complain about. You'll be like, oh, this castle's in the background, but I can't actually go to it. But it's there to make the world look beautiful. A lot of RPGs have places, buildings you can't walk into, or just stuff like that. So I do like that they're still kind of keeping that. Some have taken that to mean that battles in this game aren't encounter-based. Is that true? So basically what they're talking about here is that the PV kind of misled people in a way, because you see Alphen running around in the field, and the next thing you see is him fighting. But it's still going to be, you're going to see the enemy in the open field, you'll run into them, and then your 4 characters you have at the forefront of your team, or I guess 1 or 2 in the beginning of the game. That's how it'll start, and then you'll be in the field and you'll play like a normal Tales game. They try various approaches But between designing the fields to work and making the Tales party combat fun, that didn't really mesh well. Ultimately, the players wanted to enjoy both, so we used encounters. I'm fine with encounters because it's an RPG, and I feel like encounters are the best way for just RPGs in general to be. It doesn't need to be the especially when it's a party-based game, that really wouldn't work in like an open field kind of thing. You see enemies just kind of in the background, and then you have 6 characters running behind you. I don't think that would look very well. Conversations between characters as you see the battle results are popular. Can we assume they're still in? We're still talking about how control should flow between field exploration and battle generally. I can't say how it'll shake out, but there's been a little bit of tension between wanting to learn and enjoy the characters and wanting to move to the next goal. We're trying different approaches. So they're talking about how when you win a fight and then you'll have 2 characters from your party, or 3, kind of have a dialogue as to, you usually it's pretty funny. But it seems like they're trying different approaches. But I'd say for the most part, we'll probably still have end battle kind of dialogue. But it does seem like they're trying to incorporate lore about the characters in these end of battle scenes. Right here, they just talk about how being a producer of action games like God of War and Code Vein, applying the experience to that here. It's like I said before, it's mostly about that responsive battle idea. For instance, we don't want it to be the kind of combat where a gauge goes up based on events in combat. So you fight while watching the gauge. We want players to look at what the enemy is and what they're doing, how they're attacking. So they're making this game in a way where you actually will have to be strategic in how you fight specific enemies. So they don't want it to just be like, oh, you can just hack and slash your way through everything. So they want to have a fundamental kind of strategic value to this game. But the battles are party-based. Yes, you saw Alpha and Shield in the PV, but there are more characters. This doesn't obviously confirm anything, but that in my head, I'm thinking, okay, so those other 2 characters we saw for that split second are not party members, which would be good, because they had barely any kind of unique design to them. So that in my head, I have that worry kind of put away. You can't have Tales without animated cutscenes, opening song, and skits. Will we see those? I would hope so. We've been talking about when and how to use animated cutscenes since the start. Ufotable is doing the animation for the game, and I think you'll get what you want from them. On the other hand, we hope that from the PV, you saw just how far our 3D rendering has advanced. We're expecting the quality and expressiveness of the 3D to change the game's relationship with animation a bit. We've been talking about what's the most appropriate place to use this type of cutscene from the beginning of development, wondering if this is the place for evolution or change, but we will not remove animation altogether. That's a tradition we're keeping. So we'll still have skits. We'll still have our opening song, which will be done by Ufotable, and the animated cutscenes will be done by Ufotable. So nothing to worry about there. For the most part, at least that's what it sounds like here. They're talking about the soundtrack, and they can't reveal who's going to be in charge of everything yet. About the story, I was struck by a Twitter exchange from earlier where you said you wanted the story to leave a good impression. And he says, I'm not interested in which game did what. Some have a very clean ending and some don't. I personally don't mind either way. Those are people who will take the most depressing ending at face value. I don't think that it's the bad endings are bad so much as you need to write an ending that users can accept. If you can't, good or bad, your ending won't fly. I think a game's impression is less about the story itself and more about making the players feel like the journey they've taken leads to the ending. So they're basically saying, what they're not trying to make a story that people are going to be like, oh, this is the greatest story of all time. They want a story that fans are going to be happy with. It may not have a good ending. The characters may all die at the end. The characters may all live at the end, but what they want is just a cohesive story that it says a total experience that people feel value in, and not in just this game alone. So they want Tales fans, to have a satisfying story within this game. Now talking about general management advice. Strong advice about foreign markets, not only how the game should be, but how to communicate, and that the channels are totally different. He also advised me on how to communicate on social media. It's not just receiving either. You see that a lot. Like, Tales, for the most part, over the last, ever since social media was really a big thing, Tales wasn't really something you saw on social media a lot until very recently when it came to Crestoria and Arise. With Asteria and Tales of the Rays, they have Twitter accounts that post whenever new content comes out, but it's not like constant post. The Tales of the Rays Twitter will only post whenever new stuff comes out. So, obviously, they're trying to change that and stay more active on social media. You announced the game with a release date of 2020. How do you plan to release updates going forward? I can't give you exact data right now. Things may change based on user feedback, and we're always considering how fast to reveal. We'll do our best to respond to fan reaction, and we'll develop base. Just be patient till 2020. So I'm guessing they don't have an official date yet in their mind for 2020, which is why they're saying this, because there could be road bumps that need to push things back in 2020, but obviously their goal is 2020. Next year is the Tales series 25th anniversary. Is that also part of your consideration? It is close to 25th anniversary, and we are keen that we would like this to be an anniversary. We are keenly aware that this would be an anniversary title. It is also the brand's benefit to do something big for a 25th anniversary, and if this game is part of that, we have a responsibility to live up to that position. So saying if that game is part of that kind of hints at maybe they have something else planned. Maybe some big remake or remaster for an older title. Obviously, nothing's confirmed with that, but I could totally see that being a thing. You've already stressed the importance of communicating with players. Are you thinking of other ways to get in contact with the fans Tales hasn't done before, including your Twitter updates? Of course, we've taken measures Tales has not done before. We may respond to user wishes. We started a dev blog because it was requested. We're working on various ways to open conversation with players on the internet, and nothing is off the table because we haven't done it before. I want to engage as a user, so they're going to be listening to fans. If stuff comes out that fans don't like, they will know about it, and, based on how much, players feel about some things, they may actually actively change things during this process. In the recent entries of the series have all been shared continuities like Zillia and Zillia 2, Vesperia and Vesperia. Is this a fully standalone? As of now, we are not planning a follow-up title, nor is this a continuity with any previous titles. We want new players to be able to fully enjoy this. So, once again, reiterating, this does not exist in the Vesperia and Vesperia world for anyone who was still holding out some kind of hope, even though it was already kind of knocked out. Any final words for the fans waiting for release? I'm new to Tales, a brand that has continued for over 20 years. I'm trying to create Tales of Arise to bring the brand to its 25th anniversary and beyond. The changes of the game are a part of a movement for the sake of creating a better future together. Many of you will be worried about so much changing in a short time, but that's why it's important that we explain each element clearly as we increase our opportunities to answer your concerns. We're prepared to have that conversation constantly, even if we haven't revealed anything new, and we want that conversation to be valuable. We'll hope you continue supporting us. And then Tales of Arise is available for pre-order at all these places. So, overall, and this went way longer than I said. I said I didn't want this to be 30 minutes, but it's like I've been recording this for like 40 minutes. So, anyone who stuck by to the end, major props and thanks to you. So yeah, overall, a lot of this stuff is good. They are really trying to, they're trying to evolve the franchise while also keeping it Tales, so it still does have that unique feel to it. Obviously, we only have 2 characters to kind of judge for right now. I assume as time goes on, I would assume before the end of 2019, we might know what the full cast looks like. It's my biggest worry when I saw that first PV was that you see this part of the trailer where Alphen and Shion are jumping forward with these 2 other characters, and they have very basic NPC kind of outfit designs, and I was like, oh, please don't let these two be party members, because that would be very disappointing. Tails has always been known for having very cool and unique character designs. In my opinion, I don't really think there's any main Tails character who I've really had an issue with their design. But overall, this is very exciting stuff. Very exciting that they want to stay more interactive with the fan base itself. So any kind of, hopes that the overall fandom has, maybe something that they change within the games. But anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think of this article down below. Does this make you more excited for the game? Does it put some of your worries to rest? Does this give you more worries? Definitely let me know down below. Like I said before, make sure you go ahead and follow Abyssal Chronicles over on Twitter, because they will post all this kind of stuff when it comes out. I mean, I kind of do the same thing, but they're much more official about it with their posts. Like you get full blogs like this, whereas I just release videos. But anyways, guys, that is it for this video. Don't forget to subscribe for more if you're new to the channel. I will see you all next time. Have a wonderful day, everyone.